The morning started like any other Tuesday in London. People rushed to work, buses honked their horns, and the city moved at its usual frantic pace. But inside the walls of Parliament, something extraordinary was about to unfold. Something that would shake the foundations of international politics. James had been working as a ceremonial guard for 12 years. He stood outside the Parliament building every day, dressed in his traditional uniform, watching tourists take photos and politicians hurry past. Most people thought his job was simple. Stand still, look impressive, don't move. But James knew things. He heard things. And today, he had decided he couldn't stay silent anymore. The decision hadn't come easily. For months, James had wrestled with his conscience. He had a family to think about. A wife who taught at the local school. 2 kids who loved football and dreamed of becoming doctors. His job provided stability, respect, a decent pension. Why would anyone throw all that away? But some secrets are too big to keep. Some truths demand to be told no matter the personal cost. It started 6 months earlier during a special security briefing. James and the other senior guards had been called into a private meeting. They were told that an important American delegation would be visiting. Standard procedure, really. Parliament hosted foreign dignitaries all the time. The guards were given additional protocols, reminded about confidentiality, and warned to be extra vigilant. What made this different was the level of secrecy surrounding it. Usually, diplomatic visits were announced in advance. Press releases went out. Security arrangements were coordinated openly with the media. But this visit was different. Completely off the books. No cameras allowed. No official record. Even the guest list was classified. James didn't think much of it at first. Perhaps it was a sensitive negotiation. Trade deals often required discretion. Political discussions sometimes needed privacy. He simply followed his orders and prepared for the arrival. The day of the meeting arrived on a cold Wednesday in March. James was positioned at the east entrance, a less public area of the building. Only senior officials used this entrance. It was quiet, away from the tourists and the main chambers where debates happened. A black car pulled up just before noon. The windows were tinted so dark that James couldn't see inside. The vehicle had diplomatic plates, but something felt off. Usually, diplomatic cars had small flags or emblems. This one was completely plain, anonymous, like it was trying not to be noticed. The door opened and several men in dark suits stepped out first. Security personnel, clearly. They looked around carefully, checking every corner, every shadow. Then the main guest emerged. James recognized him immediately. It was impossible not to. That distinctive posture, the carefully styled hair, the confident walk. It was the former American president, arriving for a meeting that officially didn't exist. James maintained his professional composure. He nodded respectfully as the group passed. His job was to observe and protect, not to question. But his mind was already working. Why would a former president visit Parliament in complete secrecy? What kind of meeting required this level of discretion? The visitor disappeared inside, escorted by high-ranking officials. James resumed his position, standing perfectly still, looking straight ahead. But his ears were alert. Over the years, he had learned that people often forgot guards were even there. They were like furniture, part of the building itself, and when people feel unobserved, they talk more freely. About an hour later, voices echoed down the corridor. James recognized one of them immediately. It was a senior minister, someone who had been in government for decades. The man was speaking in hushed but urgent tones. James couldn't make out every word, but certain phrases caught his attention. "The documents prove everything," the minister said. "If this gets out, it changes the entire narrative." Another voice, younger and more nervous, responded, "But we have an obligation to transparency. The public has a right to know." "The public," the older voice said with clear disdain, "doesn't understand the complexity of international relations. Some things are better left buried." James felt his stomach tighten. He had served his country faithfully for over a decade. He believed in duty, in honor, in the oath he had taken, but he also believed in truth. And something about this conversation felt deeply wrong. The voices faded as the speakers moved away. James stood alone again, processing what he had heard. Documents? What documents? What narrative were they trying to protect or change? Over the following weeks, James noticed more unusual activity. The same visitor returned twice more, always in secret, always using the east entrance. Each time, the meetings lasted for hours. Each time, James caught fragments of conversations that troubled him more and more. He started keeping notes. Not officially and not in any formal way, just small observations written in a personal notebook he kept at home. Dates, times, who attended, snippets of conversation. He wasn't sure what he would do with the information. He just knew that something significant was happening and someone needed to keep a record. Then came the breakthrough. It was a Friday evening, and most of the building had emptied out. James was finishing his shift when he heard voices coming from one of the smaller meeting rooms. The door was slightly ajar and warm light spilled into the darkened hallway. He shouldn't have listened. Every rule of his profession told him to walk away. But something made him pause. Perhaps it was intuition. Perhaps it was the tone of urgency in the voices. Or perhaps it was simply that he had reached a point where he needed to know the truth. The agreement was clear, one voice said. James recognized it as belonging to a senior American official who had accompanied the former president on his visits. We buried the investigation. We made sure the financial records stayed sealed. And in return, certain policy decisions were made that benefited everyone involved. But that was before. Another voice interrupted. The situation has changed. There are journalists asking questions. Investigators who won't let it go. We can't keep this quiet forever. We don't need forever, the American official replied coldly. We just need long enough for everyone involved to secure their positions. Long enough for the narrative to solidify. After that, it won't matter what anyone discovers. The story will be set. James felt his blood run cold. This wasn't diplomatic negotiation. This wasn't normal political discussion. This was something else entirely. A cover-up, a conspiracy, an agreement between powerful people to hide something from the public they were supposed to serve. He moved away from the door carefully, his mind racing. What should he do? Who could he trust? If these people were willing to bury investigations and hide financial records, what else might they be capable of? That night, James barely slept. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about his children. He thought about the kind of world he wanted them to grow up in. A world where truth mattered, where powerful people couldn't simply hide their crimes behind closed doors, where ordinary citizens had the right to know what their leaders were really doing. By morning, his decision was made. He would gather evidence. He would document everything. And when the time was right, he would expose the truth. No matter what it cost him personally, the path ahead would be dangerous. He knew that. But some battles have to be fought. Some truths have to be told. And James had decided he would be the one to tell this truth, regardless of the consequences. The guard who everyone thought just stood still and looked impressive was about to become the most important witness in a scandal that would shake two nations. The next few weeks were the most stressful of James's life. During the day, he maintained his professional demeanor, standing at his post, nodding politely to passing officials. But inside, his mind was constantly working, planning, observing. He had become a spy in his own workplace, and the weight of that secret pressed down on him every single day. His wife noticed the change first. Over dinner one evening, she reached across the table and touched his hand. "You've been quiet lately," she said gently. "Is everything okay at work?" James forced a smile. "Just tired? They've added extra shifts because of all the diplomatic meetings." It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. He hated keeping secrets from her. In their 15 years of marriage, they had always been honest with each other. But how could he explain what he was doing? How could he tell her that he was collecting evidence against some of the most powerful people in the world? She would worry. She would be afraid. And she would be right to feel both those things. At work, James began to develop a system. He couldn't carry a phone or recording device while on duty. Security protocols were too strict, and he would be caught immediately. Instead, he relied on his memory and his observations. After each shift, he would go to a quiet cafe near his home and write down everything he had seen and heard that day. Every conversation fragment, every unusual meeting, every person who attended the secret gatherings. The east entrance became his primary focus. It was clear that this was where the most sensitive meetings took place. James volunteered for more shifts at that location, and his supervisors were happy to accommodate. After all, he was one of their most reliable guards. Nobody suspected that his motivation was anything other than dedication to duty. One afternoon, James got lucky. A junior assistant rushed past him carrying a folder stuffed with papers. The young man was clearly flustered, probably late for a meeting. As he hurried through the doorway, several sheets of paper slipped from the folder and fluttered to the ground. "Let me help you," James said quickly, bending down to gather the fallen documents. "Oh, thank you so much," the assistant said gratefully, already moving toward the meeting room. "Just leave them on the reception desk inside." James collected the papers carefully. As he did, his eyes scanned the contents. Most of it was routine correspondence, meeting agendas, dietary requirements for visiting dignitaries. But one document caught his attention immediately. It was an email chain. The subject line read, "Financial disclosures, confidential handling required." James's heart began to race. He knew he only had seconds. The assistant would realize the papers were missing soon. Security cameras covered most areas, though not all. He quickly stepped into a small alcove, one of the few blind spots he had identified over the years. His hands trembling slightly, he used his personal phone to photograph the document. The quality wasn't perfect, but it was readable. Names, dates, amounts of money transferred between accounts, references to agreed terms and mutual understanding. "Excuse me, did you find those papers?" The assistant's voice called from down the corridor. James stepped out of the alcove, his expression calm. "Just bringing them to you now," he said, walking toward the reception area. He handed over the stack of documents, including the crucial email chain. The assistant thanked him and disappeared into the meeting room. James returned to his post, his pulse gradually slowing. He had just committed a serious breach of protocol. If anyone discovered what he had done, he would be fired immediately. Possibly prosecuted. But now he had real evidence. Something concrete. Something that proved financial connections between the parties involved in these secret meetings. That evening, James made copies of the photograph. He saved them to multiple secure cloud storage accounts, each with different passwords. He wasn't technically sophisticated, but he had learned enough from online research to protect the information. If something happened to him, if he was discovered or silenced, the evidence would still exist. The pattern of secret meetings continued throughout April and into May. James documented each one. He noticed that certain individuals appeared repeatedly. There was a British businessman with connections to energy companies, an American lawyer who specialized in international finance, several politicians from both countries, all of them with significant influence in their respective governments. But it was during a late-night security sweep that James discovered something that changed everything. He was walking through the less-used corridors of the building, checking that all doors were properly locked. This was standard procedure at the end of the day, ensuring the building was secure before the night shift took over. As he passed one of the small conference rooms, he noticed light seeping under the door. That was unusual. Most meetings ended by early evening. James checked his watch. It was nearly 10 o'clock at night. Who would be meeting this late? He paused, listening. Voices were clearly audible through the door. They weren't trying to be quiet, probably assuming the building was empty except for minimal security staff. James recognized the voice of the former American president immediately. The distinctive tone, the confident speech pattern, it was unmistakable. "The problem is the journalist," the former president was saying. "She's been digging into the foundation's finances. My lawyers say she's gotten hold of some documentation." "Can't you discredit her?" another voice asked. British accent, cultured, someone from the upper levels of government. Challenge her sources? Question her motives? "We've tried that approach before," the American voice replied, and James could hear the frustration. "It doesn't work anymore. The public is too suspicious. They expect politicians to deny everything. We need a different strategy. What do you suggest?" the British voice asked. There was a pause. Then the former president spoke again, and his words made James's blood run cold. "We need to get ahead of the story. Release a modified version of the truth. Admit to some minor irregularities, claim they were honest mistakes, show remorse. Then when the full story comes out, people will think they already know everything. It's damage control." "A limited hangout," the British official said thoughtfully. "Yes, that could work. But we need to control the narrative carefully. Choose which journalists get the story. Frame it properly." James felt sick. These weren't public servants discussing how to serve their countries. These were people planning how to manipulate the truth, how to deceive millions of citizens who trusted them. The casual way they discussed it made it even worse, like it was just another business problem to solve. He moved away from the door as quietly as possible. His mind was made up. He had enough evidence now. Not everything, perhaps, but enough to start asking serious questions, enough to demand a proper investigation. The time for silent observation was ending. Soon he would need to act, but first he needed to find someone he could trust, someone with the power to do something about what he had discovered, someone who wouldn't be part of the conspiracy themselves. That would be the hardest part of all. Because in a system where powerful people protected each other, where secrets were kept and deals were made in shadows, finding someone truly committed to truth was like searching for a diamond in a dark cave. Difficult, dangerous, but absolutely necessary. James walked home that night through the quiet London streets. Spring rain had started to fall, cold drops that soaked through his jacket. He didn't mind. The rain felt cleansing somehow, like the world was washing itself clean, preparing for something new. He thought about his children asleep in their beds. He thought about all the other children in Britain and America and around the world. They deserved leaders who told the truth. They deserved a government that served them, not one that schemed and manipulated and lied. Whatever happened next, James knew he was doing the right thing. The evidence was gathered. The truth was documented. Now he just needed the courage to bring it into the light. And courage, he was discovering, wasn't the absence of fear. It was acting despite the fear. It was knowing the risks and taking them anyway because some things mattered more than personal safety. The guard was becoming a whistleblower. And the powerful people who thought they could hide their secrets forever were about to learn a very important lesson. The truth always finds a way out, always. James spent the next week researching journalists. Not just any journalists, but ones with a track record of integrity. People who had risked their careers to expose corruption before. People who couldn't be bought or intimidated easily. The list was shorter than he had hoped. Many journalists, he discovered, were too close to power. They attended the same parties as politicians. Their children went to the same schools. They had book deals and television contracts that depended on maintaining access to important people. They weren't necessarily corrupt, but they were part of the system, and the system protected itself. Then James found Rachel Chen. She was an investigative reporter for a mid-sized newspaper that prided itself on accountability journalism. Her articles had exposed financial fraud in local government, revealed conflicts of interest in planning decisions, and uncovered nepotism in public appointments. She had been sued twice and won both cases. She had received threats, but she kept reporting. What impressed James most was an interview he found online. Someone had asked Rachel why she continued doing dangerous investigative work when she could earn more money writing easier stories. Her answer was simple: because someone has to. Because in a democracy, citizens need to know the truth about their leaders. It's not glamorous work and it doesn't make you popular, but it's necessary. That's who James needed. Someone who understood the truth mattered more than popularity or profit. Making contact was tricky. James couldn't use his work email or phone. Those would be monitored. He couldn't approach Rachel directly at her office because he might be seen. Instead, he created a new email account using a public computer at the local library. He kept his message brief and cryptic. I work in government security. I have evidence of serious wrongdoing involving high-level officials from 2 countries. I believe you are someone who can be trusted with this information. If you are interested, please reply with a time and place where we can meet privately. He signed it simply. A concerned citizen. 2 days passed with no response. James began to worry. Perhaps Rachel received dozens of messages like this from conspiracy theorists and attention seekers. Perhaps she had dismissed his email as another false lead. He was considering how to make another attempt when his phone buzzed with a notification. Rachel had replied. Her message was cautious but interested. I receive many claims of wrongdoing. Most turn out to be exaggerated or misunderstood situations. However, I am always willing to listen to credible sources. There is a public park near the river. Greenside Park. I walk there most mornings around 7 o'clock. If you wish to speak with me, you can find me there tomorrow. Come alone, and bring whatever evidence you feel comfortable sharing. James barely slept that night. He went over everything in his mind. What if this was a mistake? What if Rachel couldn't be trusted after all? What if someone had intercepted their emails and was setting a trap? The paranoia felt ridiculous, but given what he knew about the people involved, perhaps it wasn't paranoia at all. The morning was cool and misty. James left his house early, telling his wife he wanted to go for a run before work. He took a bus to a neighborhood he rarely visited, then walked the rest of the way to Greenside Park. These precautions might be unnecessary, but they made him feel slightly more secure. The park was quiet. A few joggers passed by, focused on their exercise. An elderly man fed ducks by the pond. James walked along the main path, scanning the area. Then he saw her. A woman in her mid-30s, athletic build, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She was sitting on a bench, reading a newspaper. Real paper, not a phone screen. James approached slowly. As he got closer, Rachel looked up. Their eyes met. She gave a small nod in acknowledgement. James sat down on the opposite end of the bench, leaving a respectful distance between them. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Rachel folded her newspaper and said quietly, "You're the concerned citizen?" "Yes," James replied. His mouth felt dry. "Tell me why I should listen to you," Rachel said, not unkindly but directly. "I get approached by people regularly who claim to have explosive information. Usually it's nothing. Sometimes it's someone with a personal grudge trying to use me to settle scores. I need to know you're legitimate." James had prepared for this. He pulled out his phone and opened a photo. Not one of the documents he had photographed. Something less sensitive but still significant. It showed him in his guard uniform, standing at the east entrance of Parliament. The timestamp was visible. "I'm a parliamentary guard," he said. "I've worked there for 12 years. I have security clearance. I've been observing meetings that aren't on any official schedule. Meetings between high-level officials and a former American president. Meetings where they discuss covering up financial impropriety and manipulating public perception." Rachel's expression changed. The professional skepticism remained, but there was now genuine interest in her eyes. "That's a serious allegation. Do you have proof?" "Some," James said carefully. "Photographs of documents. Detailed notes of conversations I've overheard. Dates and times of secret meetings. Names of people involved. It's not complete, but it's enough to warrant a proper investigation." "Why come to me?" Rachel asked. "Why not go to your supervisors? Or to the police?" James had thought about this question. "Because some of my supervisors are involved. Not all of them. But I don't know who I can trust in my own organization. As for the police, this involves people with significant political influence. I'm afraid that any official complaint would be buried before it went anywhere. I need someone outside the system. Someone who can publish the truth even if powerful people try to stop them." Rachel studied him carefully. James could see her mind working, evaluating him, assessing whether he was credible or crazy. Finally, she spoke. "What you're describing could be a major story. It could also be a trap, or a misunderstanding, or a situation more complicated than it appears. I'm willing to look at your evidence, but I need to verify everything independently. I won't publish anything I can't confirm through multiple sources." "I understand," James said. "I'm not asking you to trust me blindly. I'm asking you to investigate. Look at the evidence. Follow the leads. If I'm wrong, you'll discover that. But if I'm right, then people need to know." Rachel nodded slowly. "Okay, show me what you have." James had brought his laptop in a backpack. He opened it and showed Rachel the photographs of documents he had collected. As she looked through them, her expression became more serious. She asked questions. Specific questions about dates, about who was present at various meetings, about the chain of custody for the documents he had photographed. "These financial records," Rachel said, pointing at one image. "They show large transfers between accounts in different countries. But I need more context. Who owns these accounts? What were the transfers for? Without that information, this could be entirely legitimate business transactions." "I know," James admitted. "That's why I need your help. I have pieces of the puzzle, but I don't have the skills or resources to investigate properly. You do. You know how to trace financial records. You know how to find sources. You can request official documents under Freedom of Information laws. I can't do any of that without exposing myself." Rachel was quiet for a long moment, scrolling through the images on James's laptop. Finally, she looked up at him. "This is going to take time. Weeks, maybe months. I'll need to verify everything, find additional sources, build a complete picture. Are you prepared for that?" Are you prepared for what might happen when this story becomes public? James thought about his family, his job, his quiet, ordinary life. He thought about what he might lose. Then he thought about the conversations he had overheard, about powerful people casually discussing how to deceive millions of citizens. He thought about his children and the world they would inherit. Yes, he said firmly. I'm prepared. Rachel closed the laptop and handed it back to him. I'm going to need you to send me all of this through a secure channel. I'll give you instructions on how to do that, and I'm going to need you to continue observing and documenting. But carefully. Don't take risks that might expose you. If they discover what you're doing, you'll be in danger and the story will be buried. I understand, James said. One more thing, Rachel added, her voice serious. Once we start down this path, there's no going back. If this story is as big as you think it is, powerful people will try to stop it. They'll try to discredit you. They might try to threaten you. They'll definitely try to threaten me. Are you absolutely certain you want to do this? James looked out at the park. The morning mist was clearing and sunlight was beginning to break through the clouds. A new day starting, a chance for something better. I've never been more certain of anything in my life, he said. Rachel stood up, preparing to leave. Then let's find the truth together. I'll be in touch with those secure communication instructions. In the meantime, be careful. Trust no one at work. Vary your routines. And if anything feels wrong, if you sense any danger at all, contact me immediately. She walked away, disappearing into the morning crowds of joggers and dog walkers. James sat alone on the bench for a few more minutes, processing what had just happened. He had crossed a line. He was committed now. There was no turning back. Rachel worked fast. Within 3 days of their meeting, she had verified several key details from James's information. The companies he had mentioned in his notes were real. The financial transfers he had photographed corresponded with public records. Though the full amounts and purposes had been carefully hidden through complex corporate structures, she communicated with James through an encrypted messaging app she had taught him to use. Her messages were always brief and professional, but James could sense the growing excitement behind her words. She was onto something big. She knew it. I've found 3 offshore companies that appear to be connected, one message read. They all have the same registered agent in Panama. Money flows through them in a pattern that suggests deliberate obscuring of the original source and final destination. I need more information about the meeting on April 18th. Who else was present besides the people you've already mentioned? James consulted his notes. April 18th had been a particularly busy day. Multiple visitors, several overlapping meetings. He had written down every detail he could remember, but some information was incomplete. He replied to Rachel with what he had, including descriptions of people he hadn't been able to identify by name. The investigation consumed his thoughts. At work, he continued his duties, but every moment was now about gathering more information. He paid attention to casual conversations between officials. He noted which visitors arrived together, suggesting prior relationships. He observed body language during meetings, trying to determine who had power and who was merely following orders. His wife was becoming more concerned. One evening, as they sat together after the children had gone to bed, she put down her book and looked at him directly. James, something is going on with you. I can see it. You're distracted all the time. You're up late at night. You keep checking your phone. Please tell me what's happening. James felt torn. He wanted to protect her from worry, but he also hated lying to her. They had built their marriage on honesty. Finally, he made a decision. He would tell her, but not everything. Enough to help her understand without putting her in danger. I've discovered something at work, he said slowly. Something wrong. Something that involves important people breaking rules and hiding the truth from the public. I've been documenting it, and I've connected with a journalist who's investigating. His wife's face went pale. James, that sounds dangerous. If these are important people, they have resources. They could hurt you. They could hurt our family. I know, James said, taking her hand. I've thought about that. But I've also thought about what kind of example I want to set for our kids. Do I teach them to stay quiet when they see wrongdoing? Or do I teach them to stand up for what's right even when it's difficult? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she squeezed his hand. I'm frightened, but I'm also proud of you. Just promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't take unnecessary risks. I promise, James said, and he meant it. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He was just trying to do the right thing. The next breakthrough in the investigation came from an unexpected source. Rachel contacted James with urgent news. "I found someone else. Another person who worked in the American administration. They're willing to talk, but only if I can verify your information first. They want to know they're not the only whistleblower." James felt a surge of hope. Another witness meant corroboration. It meant the story was bigger than just his observations. Rachel arranged a secure video call between the three of them. James was nervous, unsure what to expect. The other whistleblower appeared on screen. A woman in her 40s with tired eyes but a determined expression. She introduced herself simply as Catherine. No last name, not yet. She had worked in the administration's financial oversight office. "I saw irregularities in how certain funds were being handled," Catherine explained. "Money that was supposed to go to approved programs was being redirected through intermediary organizations. When I raised concerns, I was told to drop it. When I persisted, I was reassigned to a different department. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong." James shared his observations about the secret meetings in Parliament. As he described what he had witnessed, Catherine's face showed recognition. "That matches what I suspected," she said. There was coordination between American officials and their British counterparts. They were setting up a system to move money around in ways that avoided proper oversight. It was sophisticated. Not technically illegal if you looked at each transaction individually. But when you saw the pattern, it was clear the whole purpose was to hide something. Rachel asked detailed questions, taking notes furiously. The picture was becoming clearer. This wasn't just about one incident or one corrupt deal. It was a systematic arrangement between officials in two countries, designed to benefit themselves and their associates while hiding the truth from taxpayers and voters. The foundation was the key. Catherine continued. It was presented as a charitable organization, but it was really a way to channel money from foreign donors who wanted political influence. The donations would come in, supposedly for charitable purposes, and then the foundation would spend money in ways that just happened to benefit the donors' interests. It was legalized corruption, and when the previous administration ended, they were desperate to hide the evidence. James listened, fascinated and horrified. His observations had been pieces of a puzzle. Catherine was helping to reveal the complete picture, and it was worse than he had imagined. After the call ended, James sat in silence for a while, processing everything. The scale of the deception was enormous. It involved major political figures, international business interests, and complicated financial schemes designed specifically to avoid detection. No wonder they had been meeting in secret. No wonder they were so concerned about journalists asking questions. Rachel's next message came late that night. "I need to expand the investigation. I'm bringing in 2 colleagues I trust completely. Both are experienced investigative journalists. We need more people to follow all the leads. Are you comfortable with that?" James hesitated. Each new person brought into the investigation was a potential security risk. But Rachel was right. The story was too big for one journalist to handle alone. He typed his response. "Yes, but please be certain you can trust them." "With my life," Rachel replied. The investigation entered a new phase. Rachel and her colleagues worked around the clock, following financial trails, requesting official documents, interviewing sources. James continued his role as the inside observer, feeding them real-time information about meetings and conversations. But the pressure was building. At work, James noticed changes in security procedures. New protocols were being implemented. Guards were being reminded about confidentiality agreements. There was talk of random security checks, including reviews of personal electronic devices. James became more careful. He stopped taking photos at work. Instead, he relied entirely on his memory and his written notes, which he kept at home in a safe location. He varied his routines, never leaving the building the same way twice. He checked regularly to see if he was being followed, though he felt slightly ridiculous doing so. Then came the incident that confirmed his paranoia wasn't paranoia at all. He was walking home from work one evening when he noticed a car. Nothing special about it, just a dark sedan. But it was the same car he had seen parked near Parliament earlier that day. And when he turned down a side street to test his suspicion, the car turned as well. James's heart began to race. He walked faster, taking several random turns. The car stayed behind him, maintaining a discreet distance but definitely following. Finally, James ducked into a busy shopping center, using the crowds and multiple exits to lose his pursuer. He emerged on a different street and quickly caught a bus going in the opposite direction from his home. That night, he sent Rachel an urgent message. "I was followed today. They're watching me. I think they suspect something." Rachel's response came quickly. "This is serious. We need to accelerate the timeline. I've been holding off on publishing because I wanted more verification, but if they're onto you, we might not have much time. Can you get me a recorded statement? Something on video where you explain everything you've witnessed? We may need it." James thought about the risks. A video statement would be irrevocable evidence of his involvement. But Rachel was right. If they were already watching him, trying to protect his anonymity might be pointless. Better to create a record of the truth while he still could. He spent the next evening creating the video, using his laptop camera in the privacy of his home office. He spoke calmly and clearly, describing his observations, explaining the evidence he had gathered, naming the people he had seen at the secret meetings. It took several attempts to get it right, but finally he had a statement he was satisfied with. He uploaded it to a secure storage service and sent Rachel the access codes. "If anything happens to me," he wrote, "make sure this gets published." "Nothing is going to happen to you," Rachel replied. But they both knew that was a promise she couldn't keep. The investigation was approaching its climax. The truth was almost ready to be revealed. But the danger was growing with each passing day, and James knew that powerful people would do almost anything to protect their secrets. The summons came on a Tuesday morning. James arrived at work to find a message waiting for him. He was to report to the head of security immediately. No explanation given, just a direct order. James felt his stomach drop. This was it. They had discovered what he was doing. He considered not going, simply walking out of the building and never coming back. But that would only confirm their suspicions. And besides, he had prepared for this possibility. Rachel had his evidence. Catherine had corroborated his story. The investigation could continue even without him. He walked to the security office, his mind racing through possible scenarios. How much did they know? What would they ask him? Should he deny everything or admit the truth? The head of security, a stern man named Robert who had worked in intelligence before joining the Parliamentary Guard, was waiting with another person. A woman in an expensive suit carrying a briefcase. She had the look of a lawyer, or possibly someone from internal affairs. "James, thank you for coming," Robert said, his voice neutral. "Please sit down." James sat. His hands were sweating, but he kept them steady in his lap. The woman opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. "James, I'm Helen Davies. I work for governmental oversight. We've become aware of some unusual activity, and your name has come up in our investigation. I want to be very clear with you. This conversation is being recorded, and anything you say may be used in official proceedings. Do you understand?" James nodded. "I understand." Helen placed several photographs on the table. They showed James at various locations around Parliament. Nothing incriminating by itself, just him doing his job. Then she placed another photo. It showed him talking to Rachel in the park. The image was grainy but clearly identifiable. "Can you explain this meeting?" Helen asked. James had rehearsed this moment in his mind many times. He could lie, claim it was a coincidence, say Rachel was an old friend. But lies would only make things worse, and besides, he was tired of deception. That was the whole problem, wasn't it? Too many lies, too many secrets. "I was meeting with a journalist," James said calmly. "I provided her with information about activities I've observed at work. Activities that I believe the public has a right to know about." Robert's expression darkened. "You violated your confidentiality agreement. You shared sensitive information with an unauthorized person. That's a serious breach of security protocol." "I shared information about wrongdoing," James corrected. "There's a difference. When officials use their positions for personal benefit, when they hide their actions from the public they serve, exposing that isn't a breach of security. It's a civic duty." Helen leaned forward. "That's a very noble-sounding justification, but you don't get to decide what qualifies as wrongdoing. There are proper channels for reporting concerns. Official procedures. You bypassed all of them. Because the people involved include those who oversee the official procedures," James said. "Who do I report to when the supervisors are part of the problem? The system is designed to protect itself, not to protect the truth." "You're making very serious allegations," Helen said. "Allegations without proof are just conspiracy theories." James met her eyes. "I have proof. Documented evidence, multiple witnesses, and very soon, the public will have access to all of it. The room went very quiet. Robert and Helen exchanged glances. Finally, Helen spoke again, and her tone had shifted. Less confrontational, more calculating. James, let me explain something to you. The world of government and diplomacy is complicated. Things that might look improper to an outsider often have perfectly reasonable explanations. Context matters. You've seen fragments of conversations, pieces of meetings, but you don't understand the full picture. Then explain it to me, James challenged. Explain why officials are meeting in secret. Explain why they're discussing how to manipulate public perception. Explain the financial transfers between accounts designed to avoid oversight. I'm listening. Helen sat back, her expression unreadable. Some matters are classified for good reasons. National security, diplomatic relations, ongoing negotiations. Just because something is kept confidential doesn't mean it's corrupt. And when national security becomes an excuse to hide personal enrichment? James asked. When diplomatic relations means covering up conflicts of interest. At what point does secrecy stop being necessary and start being corruption? Robert spoke up, his voice hard. You're going to be terminated, James, effective immediately. You violated your oath. You breached security protocols, and you've demonstrated that you can't be trusted. Security will escort you from the building. You'll surrender your credentials and any materials belonging to Parliament. James had expected this. He nodded slowly. I understand. I'll collect my personal belongings. No, Robert said firmly. You'll be escorted directly out. Anything personal will be sent to your home after it's been reviewed. Reviewed for what? James asked. More evidence of truth-telling? Helen closed her folder. You think you're a hero, James, but you're not. You're a disgruntled employee who violated trust and broke the law. When this story comes out, if it comes out, that's how you'll be portrayed. Your credibility will be destroyed. Your family will suffer. Your career is over. All for what? To help some journalists sell newspapers? No, James said quietly. For my children. So they can grow up in a country where the truth matters, where leaders are accountable, where ordinary people don't have to just accept whatever they're told by those in power. He stood up. I'm ready to leave now. 2 security officers appeared as if they had been waiting just outside. They flanked James as he walked through the corridors he had patrolled for 12 years. Other guards watched as he passed, confusion and curiosity on their faces. Word would spread quickly. The reliable guard who suddenly got fired. People would speculate, gossip, make up stories. Let them, James thought. Soon enough, they would know the real story. As he was escorted through the main entrance, James took one last look at the building. So much history in these walls. So many important decisions made here. The heart of British democracy. But democracy only works when there's transparency, when citizens can hold their leaders accountable. And that's what he was fighting for. Outside, the London afternoon was bright and busy. People hurried past, focused on their own lives, unaware of the drama that had just unfolded. James pulled out his phone and sent a quick message to Rachel. I've been terminated. They know about us. Time to publish. Rachel's response came within minutes. My editor wants to wait for more verification. But I'm pushing back. Stand by. James walked to the nearest cafe and ordered a coffee. His hands were shaking slightly now that the confrontation was over. Adrenaline wearing off, reality setting in. He was unemployed. His reputation at Parliament was destroyed. His family's financial security was suddenly uncertain. But he also felt something unexpected. Relief. The secret burden he had been carrying was finally going to be shared. He didn't have to pretend anymore. He didn't have to stand silently while wrong things happened. His phone rang. It was his wife. News had traveled fast. James, your supervisor called me. He said you'd been let go. What happened? I'll explain everything when I get home, James said. But I need you to know that I did what I thought was right, and I'd do it again. There was a pause. Then his wife said, Come home. We'll figure this out together. As James left the cafe, he noticed something. A dark car parked across the street. The same model that had followed him before. They were still watching. Even though he had been fired, even though he no longer had access to the building, they wanted to know what he would do next. James looked directly at the car, letting whoever was inside know that he saw them. Then he turned and walked away, his head held high. They could follow him all they wanted. The evidence was already secure. The story was already written. They were too late to stop it. That evening, James sat with his family. His children were confused about why he was home early. His wife was trying to stay calm, but he could see the worry in her eyes. He explained as much as he could in age-appropriate terms. He had seen people doing wrong things at work. He had told the truth about it. And sometimes telling the truth has consequences. But isn't telling the truth supposed to be good? His youngest asked. It is good, James assured him. But it's not always easy. Sometimes doing the right thing is hard. Sometimes it costs you something. But it's still worth doing. Later, after the children were in bed, James and his wife talked seriously about their situation. They had some savings, enough to last a few months. James would start looking for new work immediately. They would be okay. They had to be. Do you regret it? His wife asked quietly. James thought about the question. He thought about the secret meetings, the casual corruption, the powerful people who thought they were above accountability. He thought about the evidence he had gathered, the truth that was about to be revealed. No, he said firmly. I don't regret it at all. His phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. Publication approved. Story goes live tomorrow morning. You're about to change history, James. Get ready. James showed the message to his wife. She read it, then looked at him with a mixture of fear and pride. Tomorrow morning everyone will know, she said. Yes, James replied. Tomorrow morning the truth comes out. He didn't sleep much that night. The article went live at 6 a.m. Rachel had warned James the night before, giving him time to prepare. But nothing could have really prepared him for what happened next. The headline was direct and powerful. Secret meetings. Hidden money. How officials from 2 nations conspired to hide corruption. Below it, a subheading. Parliamentary guards' evidence reveals systematic cover-up at highest levels. James read through the article on his laptop, his coffee growing cold beside him. Rachel had done an extraordinary job. Every claim was supported by evidence. Every allegation was carefully worded to avoid legal problems while still conveying the truth. She had woven together James's observations, Catherine's testimony, the financial records, and additional information her team had uncovered into a compelling narrative of corruption and deception. The article named names. Not recklessly, but where the evidence was solid. It described the secret meetings in detail. It traced the flow of money through the network of offshore companies. It explained how officials had used their positions to benefit themselves and their associates while hiding the truth from the public. And it gave James credit. Not as the sole source, but as the person whose courage had made the investigation possible. A career security officer risking everything to expose what he believed was wrong. The article described him. A man who could have stayed silent but chose to speak up. Within an hour, the story was everywhere. Other news outlets picked it up. Social media exploded with reactions. The newspaper's website crashed temporarily from the flood of traffic. Television news programs interrupted their regular schedule to discuss the revelations. James's phone started ringing constantly. Journalists wanting interviews. Former colleagues asking if it was true. His phone carrier sent him a warning about unusual activity on his account. He turned off his phone and just watched the news coverage on television. The reactions split along predictable lines. Some praised James as a whistleblower and hero. Others condemned him as a traitor who had violated his oath. Politicians from different parties responded based on their own interests. Those who had been critical of the former president called for immediate investigations. Those who supported him claimed the story was exaggerated or politically motivated. But the evidence was too strong to dismiss easily. Rachel had made sure of that. She had published supporting documents on the newspaper's website, redacting only information that could compromise ongoing security matters or private citizens. Anyone who wanted to could examine the evidence themselves. By noon, government officials were being forced to respond. The current prime minister held a press conference. He looked uncomfortable, caught between defending the institution of government and acknowledging wrongdoing by specific individuals. These are serious allegations, the prime minister said carefully. They deserve serious investigation. I have instructed the relevant oversight bodies to review all aspects of this matter. If wrongdoing occurred, those responsible will be held accountable. But I caution everyone against rushing to judgment before all facts are known. It was a typical political response. acknowledging the problem without fully committing to any course of action. But the public pressure was building. People were angry. They felt betrayed by leaders they had trusted. In America, the reaction was even more intense. The former president issued a statement through his lawyers denying everything. "These allegations are completely false and politically motivated," the statement read. "I never participated in any improper financial arrangements. The meetings described were routine diplomatic discussions. This is simply another attempt to damage my reputation and legacy." But the evidence contradicted his denials. Rachel and her team had been thorough. They had traced financial connections, documented meetings, gathered testimony from multiple sources. It wasn't just James's word against powerful politicians. It was an overwhelming pattern of evidence that pointed to systematic wrongdoing. Catherine, the American whistleblower, gave a televised interview that evening. She appeared with her face partially obscured to protect her identity, but her testimony was clear and detailed. She described the financial irregularities she had observed, the pressure she had faced to stay quiet, and her decision to come forward. "I worked in public service because I believed in serving the public," Catherine said. "When I saw officials betraying that trust, I couldn't stay silent. It wasn't easy. I knew there would be consequences. But some things are more important than career or comfort. Truth is one of those things." James watched the interview with his family. His children were starting to understand the significance of what was happening. Their father had done something important, something brave. They didn't fully grasp all the details, but they understood that he had stood up for what was right. The next few days were chaotic. James gave his own interview, appearing on a major news program to tell his story in his own words. He was nervous at first, unaccustomed to being in front of cameras. But as he spoke, his confidence grew. He wasn't saying anything he hadn't already documented. He was simply telling the truth. The interviewer asked him about the personal cost. "You lost your job. Your reputation has been attacked by some. Your family has been thrust into the spotlight. Do you regret your decision?" James answered honestly. "Of course there are moments when I wish I could have my quiet life back. But regret? No, I don't regret doing the right thing. My children are watching how I handle this. What kind of father would I be if I taught them that you should stay silent about wrongdoing, just because speaking up is inconvenient?" The interview clip went viral. James's clear, straightforward manner resonated with people. He wasn't trying to be a hero or seeking attention. He was simply an ordinary person who had seen something wrong and decided to act. That authenticity was powerful, but not everyone was supportive. James received threatening messages. Anonymous emails warned him to stop talking, to retract his statements. Someone spray-painted insults on his house. His wife had to explain to their frightened children why people were angry at their father. Rachel experienced similar harassment. Her editor hired security for her after she received credible threats. Other journalists who had worked on the story faced pressure from powerful interests to back down. But they stood firm. The evidence was solid. The story was true. They wouldn't be intimidated into silence. Meanwhile, official investigations began. Multiple government bodies announced inquiries. Parliamentary committees scheduled hearings. Law enforcement agencies in both countries started looking into potential criminal violations. The wheels of accountability were finally turning, slowly but definitely. Some of the people named in the story began to turn on each other. When faced with potential prosecution, self-interest replaced loyalty. One former official agreed to cooperate with investigators in exchange for immunity. His testimony corroborated much of what James and Catherine had revealed. The British businessman mentioned in the financial documents was arrested on money laundering charges. His lawyers immediately began negotiating a plea deal, offering to provide evidence against others in exchange for a reduced sentence. The network of corruption was unraveling, but the central figures remained defiant. The former president continued to deny everything, holding rallies where he attacked the media and called the investigation a witch hunt. His supporters believed him, or at least claimed to. The political divide in America made objective assessment of evidence increasingly difficult. In Britain, the officials involved were more subtle in their responses. They hired expensive lawyers, issued carefully worded statements, and tried to frame the story as a misunderstanding rather than corruption. Some resigned quietly, hoping to avoid further scrutiny. Others fought back, attempting to discredit James and the other whistleblowers. One evening, about a week after the story broke, James received an unexpected phone call. It was from another parliamentary guard, someone he had worked with for years. The man's voice was hesitant, uncertain. "James, I need to tell you something. I've been thinking about this all week. I saw some of those meetings too. Not all of them, but a few. I heard conversations that bothered me, but I didn't say anything. I told myself it wasn't my business, that I was probably misunderstanding things. But you were right. Something wrong was happening, and I stayed silent." James listened as his former colleague unburdened himself. "I want to support you," the man continued. "I want to tell investigators what I saw. But I'm scared. I have a family too. I saw what they did to you." "Then don't do it," James said simply. "I'm not asking anyone to sacrifice themselves. But if you do decide to come forward, I'll support you, and so will Rachel. We're building a community of people who won't stay silent anymore. You don't have to be alone in this." The call ended, but it gave James hope. He wasn't the only person who had seen wrongdoing. He wasn't the only one troubled by what powerful people were doing in the shadows. He was just the first one willing to speak up publicly. But others were finding their courage. Rachel's newspaper published follow-up stories, diving deeper into specific aspects of the scandal. Each article brought new revelations, new evidence, new witnesses. The investigation she had started with James had taken on a life of its own. 3 months after the story broke, James received an official summons. He was being called to testify before a parliamentary inquiry committee. The moment he had both dreaded and anticipated had finally arrived. He would have to tell his story under oath in public, before cameras and lawyers and politicians who would try to find any weakness in his account. Rachel had warned him this would happen. "They'll try to discredit you," she said over coffee 2 days before the hearing. "They'll question your motives, your memory, your character. They'll suggest you misunderstood what you saw, or that you're politically motivated. You need to stay calm, stick to the facts, and don't let them provoke you into saying something you'll regret." James had spent weeks preparing with the legal team that had volunteered to represent whistleblowers. They conducted mock questioning sessions, throwing difficult and sometimes hostile questions at him. They taught him how to answer clearly and concisely, how to admit when he didn't know something rather than speculating, how to maintain his composure under pressure. The morning of the hearing, James dressed carefully in his best suit. His wife helped him with his tie, her hands trembling slightly. "You're going to be brilliant," she said, though her eyes showed her worry. "Just tell the truth. That's all you have to do." The hearing room was imposing. High ceilings, wood paneling, rows of seats filled with journalists and observers. At the front sat the committee members, 7 politicians from different parties. Some had already made public statements supporting the investigation. Others had been skeptical of the allegations. All of them would question him today. James was sworn in, promising to tell the truth. The committee chair, a senior politician with decades of experience, began with basic questions. James's background, his career history, his duties as a parliamentary guard, establishing the foundation before getting to the substance. Then came the harder questions. "Mr. James, you've made serious allegations against prominent individuals. These allegations have caused significant disruption and damage to reputations. Can you explain to this committee, in your own words, what led you to believe that your observations constituted wrongdoing rather than normal diplomatic activity?" James had prepared for this. He spoke clearly, describing the pattern of secret meetings, the conversations he had overheard about hiding information and manipulating narratives, the financial documents that showed money being moved through deliberately complex structures designed to avoid oversight. "I served as a guard for 12 years, James said. "I've observed hundreds of diplomatic meetings. I understand that some discussions need to be confidential. But what I witnessed went beyond normal confidentiality. These were discussions about how to deceive the public, how to cover up financial impropriety, how to protect individuals who had violated trust. That's not diplomacy, that's corruption." One committee member, a supporter of the former president, interrupted. "But you're not a financial expert, are you? You're not a lawyer or a political analyst. How can you be certain that what seemed improper to you was actually illegal or unethical?" "I'm not claiming to be an expert," James replied calmly. "That's why I brought my observations to a journalist who could investigate properly. That's why I supported the appointment of investigators and prosecutors who have the expertise I lack. I'm simply reporting what I saw and heard." Others with more expertise have examined the evidence and reached their own conclusions. The questioning continued for hours. Each committee member took turns, some supportive, some hostile, all probing for details. James answered each question as honestly as he could, admitting when he didn't know something, providing specific details when he did. One particularly aggressive questioner tried to suggest that James had fabricated evidence or exaggerated what he had witnessed for personal gain. You've received considerable media attention from these allegations. You've been praised by some as a hero. Isn't it possible that you've been motivated by a desire for recognition rather than genuine concern about wrongdoing? James felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. I lost my job. My family has been harassed. I've received death threats. If I wanted recognition, there are much easier ways to get it than by exposing corruption and becoming a target. I did this because it was the right thing to do, regardless of the personal cost. The questioner pressed on. But you've also been offered book deals and speaking engagements, haven't you? There's potential for financial benefit from your allegations. I haven't accepted any book deals, James said firmly. I haven't been paid for any interviews. I'm testifying here today without compensation. My only goal has been to ensure that the truth comes out and that those responsible are held accountable. If you're suggesting I've profited from this, you're simply wrong. During a break in the proceedings, James stepped outside for fresh air. Several journalists approached him, but his lawyer waved them off. Rachel was waiting in the corridor. You're doing great, she told him. Keep doing exactly what you're doing. The truth is on your side. When the hearing resumed, Catherine testified via video link. She provided her account of the financial irregularities she had observed from the American side. Her testimony corroborated James's observations and added new details about how the scheme had operated. Then came testimony from some of the officials who had been named in the original story. Watching them squirm under questioning gave James a grim satisfaction. They were skilled at deflection and obfuscation, but the evidence against them was too strong. Their careful answers only made them seem more guilty. One official admitted to attending the secret meetings but claimed he had thought they were routine diplomatic consultations. I had no knowledge of any financial impropriety, he insisted. But when questioned about specific conversations and documents, his story began to fall apart. The former president did not testify in person. His lawyers appeared instead, arguing that he was not subject to British parliamentary jurisdiction and that the allegations were politically motivated. The committee was clearly frustrated by his absence, but they couldn't compel his attendance. However, his absence spoke volumes. If the allegations were truly false, why wouldn't he defend himself? Why hide behind lawyers and jurisdictional arguments? The public drew their own conclusions. As the hearings progressed over several days, a clear picture emerged. Multiple witnesses confirmed the existence of secret meetings. Financial experts testified about the suspicious patterns of money movement. Legal experts discussed potential violations of ethics rules and possibly criminal statutes. The weight of evidence was overwhelming. On the final day of testimony, James was recalled for follow-up questions. The committee chair asked him directly, Mr. James, after everything you've been through, after all the personal cost you've paid, do you believe your decision to come forward was worthwhile? James didn't hesitate. Absolutely. Democracy depends on transparency and accountability. When leaders abuse their positions, someone has to speak up. I wish it hadn't been necessary. I wish the people involved had simply done their jobs with integrity. But since they didn't, yes, coming forward was worthwhile. It was necessary. Another committee member asked, what would you say to other potential whistleblowers who might be considering whether to report wrongdoing they've witnessed? James thought carefully before answering. I would say that it's not easy. There will be consequences. You will be criticized and possibly threatened. Your life will become more difficult. But I would also say that staying silent has consequences too. When good people do nothing, bad things continue. Someone has to stand up. And if you've witnessed genuine wrongdoing, if you have real evidence, then you have a responsibility to bring it forward. Not for glory or recognition, but because it's the right thing to do. The hearing concluded late that afternoon. James walked out of the building exhausted but relieved. The hardest part was over. He had told his story under oath. His testimony was now part of the official record. Whatever happened next, the truth had been spoken in the clearest possible terms. Outside, a crowd had gathered. Some were supporters, holding signs thanking James for his courage. Others were protesters angry at what they saw as betrayal. Police maintained order between the two groups. James ignored both sides and walked to where his wife was waiting. She embraced him tightly. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. Rachel appeared with her notebook. "That was powerful testimony, James. You did exactly what you needed to do." "What happens now?" James asked. "Now we wait," Rachel said. "The committee will issue their findings. The prosecutors will continue their investigations. The legal process will unfold. It takes time, but it's moving in the right direction." That evening, news programs played clips from the hearing. Political commentators debated what it all meant. Public opinion polls showed that most people believed James's testimony. The scandal had shifted from allegation to established fact in the minds of most citizens. James sat with his children and tried to explain what had happened in terms they could understand. "Sometimes grown-ups do bad things," he told them. "And when that happens, other grown-ups have to tell the truth about it even when it's hard. That's what I did today." His daughter, who was 8, asked, "Are the bad people going to be?" 6 months after James's testimony, the first criminal charges were filed. The British businessman who had facilitated the financial transfers was indicted on money laundering and fraud charges. 2 former government officials were charged with corruption and abuse of office. The legal machinery, slow but thorough, was finally delivering consequences. In America, the situation was more complicated. Political divisions meant that accountability looked different depending on which party held power. But even there, progress was being made. Several associates of the former president were under investigation. Financial records were being subpoenaed. The net was tightening, even if the central figure remained frustratingly out of reach. James had found new employment, though not in government service. A nonprofit organization focused on government transparency had hired him as a consultant. His job was to help develop better whistleblower protection programs and to speak to government employees about ethical responsibilities. It was meaningful work, and he was good at it. The speaking engagements had increased. Universities invited him to talk to students about civic duty. Professional organizations asked him to discuss ethics in the workplace. James always emphasized the same themes: the importance of courage, the necessity of truth, and the responsibility every citizen has to hold power accountable. His family had adjusted to their new reality. The initial harassment had faded as the story moved from immediate scandal to long-term investigation. His children were proud of their father, though they didn't fully grasp the significance of what he had done. That understanding would come with time. One afternoon, James received a call from Catherine, the American whistleblower. They had stayed in touch, forming a bond through their shared experience. "Have you seen the news?" she asked excitedly. "The former president just lost a major civil lawsuit. The jury found that he had violated financial disclosure laws. It's not criminal prosecution, but it's a huge precedent." James pulled up the news on his computer. The headlines were dramatic. The jury had ruled that the former president had deliberately hidden financial conflicts of interest while in office. The penalty was substantial, but more importantly, the legal finding validated everything James and Catherine had revealed. The courts had officially confirmed that wrongdoing had occurred. "This is because of you, James," Catherine said, "because you had the courage to come forward. Without your testimony, none of this would have happened." "It was because of both of us," James corrected, "and Rachel and all the investigators who followed the leads. Change doesn't come from one person. It comes from many people doing their part." The parliamentary committee issued their final report that autumn. It was a comprehensive document, several hundred pages long, detailing the findings of their investigation. The report confirmed systematic wrongdoing, criticized multiple officials for ethical lapses, and recommended significant reforms to prevent similar abuses in the future. The report specifically praised James for his courage and integrity. "The actions of this whistleblower exemplify the best traditions of public service," the report stated. "By placing duty to country above personal interest, by pursuing truth despite personal cost, he has rendered an invaluable service to democracy itself." Reading those words, James felt vindicated. Not because he needed validation, but because it meant the system had worked eventually. Slowly, imperfectly, but ultimately, the truth had prevailed. Parliament passed new legislation strengthening whistleblower protections. Government employees would now have clearer channels for reporting wrongdoing and stronger legal protections against retaliation. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, and James had been consulted during the drafting process, his experience helping to shape the law. The political consequences continued to unfold. Several officials resigned rather than face further scrutiny. Others lost elections as voters punished them for their involvement in the scandal. The former president's political influence waned as more details emerged about his conduct. His legacy, once a subject of debate, was now permanently stained by the revelations. But perhaps the most important change was harder to measure. Citizens were paying more attention. Journalists were asking tougher questions. Government employees were more willing to report problems they observed. The culture of secrecy and unaccountability that had allowed the corruption to flourish was being challenged. 1 year after the story first broke, Rachel's newspaper won a prestigious journalism award for the investigation. James attended the ceremony as her guest. As Rachel accepted the award, she made sure to acknowledge everyone who had made the story possible. "This award belongs to the whistleblowers," Rachel said in her acceptance speech. To James, who risked everything to expose wrongdoing. To Catherine, who refused to stay silent. To all the people who provided information and testimony despite the personal cost. Journalism can't exist without sources willing to tell the truth. We're just the messengers. The real heroes are the people who give us the truth to report. The audience applauded, and James felt emotion rising in his chest. He had never sought recognition or awards. He had simply done what he believed was right. But it felt good to be acknowledged, to know that his sacrifice had meaning and impact. After the ceremony, a young woman approached James. She introduced herself as a government employee who worked in a different agency. "I've been seeing things at work that concern me," she said quietly. "Irregularities in how contracts are being awarded. Possible favoritism. I've been trying to decide whether to report it. After hearing your story, I think I know what I need to do." James talked with her for a while, sharing his experience and advice. He gave her contact information for organizations that could help her. Most importantly, he assured her that she wasn't alone, that there were people who would support her if she chose to come forward. As she walked away, James realized that this was his true legacy. Not the awards or the headlines or the legal victories. His legacy was inspiring other people to find their own courage, to stand up when they witnessed wrongdoing, to believe that ordinary citizens could make a difference. 2 years after the initial revelations, James was invited to speak at his children's school. It was career day, and parents were sharing their professions with students. James could have talked about his current work at the nonprofit. Instead, he talked about his experience as a whistleblower. He kept it simple, appropriate for young minds. He talked about seeing something wrong and deciding to tell the truth about it. He talked about how scary it was, but how important. He talked about how one person's courage could inspire others and create positive change. The children asked questions. "Were you afraid?" "Yes," he admitted. "Did you get in trouble?" "Yes, initially." "Would you do it again?" Without hesitation, yes, his own children sat in the audience beaming with pride. They understood now, more than they had 2 years ago, what their father had done and why it mattered. That evening, James sat in his backyard watching the sunset. His wife joined him, sitting close. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had stayed quiet?" she asked. James considered the question. "Sometimes. I think about how much easier life would have been. But I also think about what kind of person I would be if I had seen all that wrongdoing and done nothing. I wouldn't respect myself, and I don't think you would respect me either." "You're right," she agreed, squeezing his hand. "I married a good man, and you've stayed a good man even when it was hard." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell. Somewhere in the city, other people were making their own choices about right and wrong, about silence and courage. James hoped that his story might help them choose wisely. The scandal that James had exposed continued to have repercussions. New investigations were launched based on information that had come out during the original inquiry. The culture of accountability that his actions had helped create was producing ongoing results. But James himself was ready to move forward. He had done what he set out to do. The truth was exposed. The consequences were unfolding. Justice, imperfect but real, was being served. Now it was time to focus on the future rather than dwelling on the past. His work at the nonprofit was fulfilling. He was helping to create systems that would make it easier for the next whistleblower, so that others wouldn't have to suffer as much as he had. He was training government employees in ethical decision-making. He was advocating for stronger transparency laws. In the end, James realized his story wasn't really about bringing down powerful people. It was about empowering ordinary people. It was about showing that citizens don't have to accept corruption and deception from their leaders. It was about proving that one person, armed with nothing but truth and courage, could challenge the most powerful institutions in the world. And more than that, it was about inspiring the next generation. His children had learned that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing. Students who heard his story learned that they had power as citizens, that their voices mattered, that they didn't have to accept injustice. Years from now, when historians looked back at this period, they would write about the scandal, the investigations, the legal consequences. But James hoped they would also write about something more important: